You can take my van, but you can't take my honor. The words of Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hale, a 71-year-old veteran, spoken to a young, overzealous police officer, citing an illegally parked van modified for disability access. Just 5 minutes later, every exit of the parking lot at the Charlotte VA Veterans Center was blocked by those Richard called his battle family. The standoff became legend. Welcome to Veteran Best Stories. If it moves you, hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's amazing connecting with you from all corners of the world. Every Thursday morning, when the rising sun has yet to dry the dew on the VA Charlotte parking lot, a man whose face bears every mark of time appears. He is Lieutenant Richard Hale. He does not step out of the van. Instead, he quietly works the control lever, watching the lift platform rise like a familiar ritual. The whine of the hydraulic motor signals nothing special to anyone else, but to him, it is the sound of independence, of freedom preserved from the wreckage of war. The faded silver van, with its low floor and custom wheelchair controls, is more than mere transportation. It is a treasured relic. His second pair of legs, proof that he never surrendered. Richard lost both legs during an emergency parachute insertion in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1991. A helicopter struck hostile fire, plummeting like a heavy stone. He dragged 3 young soldiers from the burning wreck before everything exploded. When he awoke in the field hospital tent, his legs were gone, yet his heart still beat, and his honor remained intact. For more than 30 years since, each day has been a journey through memory, through pain, through a silence deeper than any battlefield. He speaks little of war, but his eyes, whenever they fix on the empty space beyond the steering wheel, ask an unanswered question. Why did I live, and why did they not? The van is where he confronts that silence each day. In the rearview mirror, his disability placard sways in the breeze. On the license plate, a faded purple heart. Purple heart. The medal for blood shed. He keeps it there not for pity, but to remind himself, I once rose from what could not rise. The few rolling steps from van to VA center are short, but for him, every meter is an oath, never to let go. Every time he pushes the wheels forward with his hands, he recalls the men who never returned home. Everything in Richard's life is as simple as he is. He seeks no spotlight, craves no recognition. Yet within him burns a steady flame, a stubborn will found only in those who have stared death in the face and still choose to live with dignity. He remembers every fallen comrade's face, recalls their eyes sharing the last sip of water on a long campaign, cherishes the rough laughter and brief pats on the back, small gestures that, now in a quieter world, sting with preciousness. None of them came back with him, and some nights Richard lies in his van, staring up at its ceiling, wondering, do they blame me for surviving? To him, the van is not just a vehicle to the medical center. It is refuge, a silent fortress, the place he allows himself to be weak, to sigh, and then to carry on. And in that fortress, he has never imagined it could be breached. The man appeared like a strange streak through familiar surroundings, dressed in deep navy uniform, sunglasses hiding half his face, walking with the assured stride of someone who's never been told no. Officer Kyle Denvers, 32 years old, only a few months into his assignment, but his reputation had already spread far. It was not a reputation to be proud of. Richard recognized that look, not one of concern nor of respect, but suspicion tinged with disdain. a gaze that had followed him down city streets before, yet had never drawn this close. Denvers approached with deliberate slowness, hand resting on his belt near his firearm, the manner of someone who comes not to help, but to assert control. "This vehicle yours?" he asked, voice low and curt, no greeting, no pleasantries. Richard turned, still holding his medical file on his lap. He did not rush his answer, his aged eyes quietly weighing each word. He had learned the hard way that his greatest errors came not from bullets, but from hasty replies. "Yes," he said. "I've parked here for more than 2 decades. May I see proof of authorization?" "My disability placard hangs from the mirror. The license plate bears a Purple Heart." Denvers glanced over, but did not truly look, his expression already made up. This old man, this wheelchair, this plate, all a charade. For a curious moment, Richard did not feel anger, only weariness. Weary of proving himself, weary of repeating what was plain to see, weary knowing that, in this man's eyes, he was not a soldier who'd halted a firestorm in an aircraft's engine room, but merely an old man clinging to privilege. That feeling was ancient, yet every time it resurfaced, its edge cut just as deep. Denvers leaned in closer, peering into the window, at the plate. "That license could be stolen." A soft-spoken claim, but it struck an unhealable wound. Richard held his silence. Memories surged like a flash flood, days spent immobile at Walter Reed, agonizing therapy sessions that screamed, relearning to sit, to roll, to hold his head upright. And now a man who'd never seen combat, never stood amidst smoke and bullets, looked upon him as if he'd never truly lived. The air turned suddenly cold, sunlight lost its warmth, birdsong fell silent, and Richard's quietude was misconstrued by Denvers. "I'll have to call a tow." Richard froze, not from fear of losing the van, but because that phrase heralded collapse. If they towed it away, he'd lose more than transportation. He'd lose the independence he'd fought for with his own body. His heart slowed its beat, yet did not tremble, for he knew some battles make no sound, but if you stay silent, you lose forever. Richard watched Denvers stride back to the patrol car, each step brimming with the conviction that power grants the right to act as one pleases. The radio crackled, cold, rigid codes hammering down on freedom. He turned away, one hand delving into his jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, as if not for a phone, but for a keepsake. The screen lit up with the name that had rescued him from the abyss more times than he could count. Colonel Dean Rowley. Not a friend, not family, but the one he trusted most when the front line was no longer bombs and bullets, but wounds inflicted by doubt. "Sir, it's Hale," his voice rasped. "They're towing me for suspected fake disability. I need you." No further explanation was needed. Rowley listened and understood. A bond born only between those who'd lain side by side in the dusty trenches, who'd leaned on each other amid artillery and tears. The call lasted just 17 seconds, yet it set in motion a machine no system could stop, the spirit of the Marine Corps. 15 minutes later, the VA Charlotte parking lot began to transform. The first SUV arrived quietly, then another, then pickups, sedans, even an old minivan. Each occupant donned civilian clothes, but in their stance and the way they regarded one another, an invisible bond was palpable. They were veterans, those who had known Richard or had once been him. Some leaned on canes, some walked unsteadily, Some still wore their old unit insignia on their jackets. Yet all headed straight for the faded silver van, where Richard sat, motionless, a lone fortress in peacetime. A silent circle formed around him. No raised voices, no slogans, no protests, only presence, growing denser like an unseen tide rising. To Richard, each face was affirmation that he was not alone. Something knotted in his chest, not tears, but belief lifted from the ashes. A broad-shouldered man in a faded uniform stepped forward, placed a firm, gentle hand on Richard's shoulder. Richard did not need to look. He recognized the touch, not consolation, but a signal. "I'm here, and I won't let anyone disrespect you." Then dozens of hands came forth. No jostling, no orders, but within 10 minutes, every exit of the parking lot was manned. No threats, no blockades, just presence. Those who once swore their lives to honor now stood again, united to defend one truth, the truth. When Denvers looked up from the patrol car, he saw a scene no police academy had taught, no conduct manual contained. Yet its weight froze him in place. Richard met his gaze without a word. He did not need to speak. His silence was now supported by dozens of others, and in that moment, he was no longer a frail veteran. He was the heart of an army alive in memory, in action, and in unwavering loyalty. For our audience, take a moment, grab a drink of water, then stay tuned for the surprising developments ahead. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is locally. It's always exciting to see viewers joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we can bring you more great tales. Rowley arrived not alone. Beside him strode a woman in a navy suit, her gaze sharp yet composed. She was Captain Hannah Briggs, a lawyer with the Marine Corps legal team, there not to argue, but to uphold the truth. Together they walked through the silent ranks. No shout, no signal needed. Their mere presence shifted the air, a solemn hush, like before a flag-raising ceremony. As they reached Richard's van, he looked up. The creases around his eyes brightened with relief. Rowley spoke no idle words. He laid a hand on the windshield, eyes fixed on Denvers, who for the first time this morning faltered. "We have all the documentation," Briggs declared, voice clear and irrefutable. She opened her leather briefcase, withdrew a thick file, neatly clipped, each section tabbed. "Here are Lieutenant Richard Hale's military records, 20 years of continuous service with Marine Corps combat units, led the 1991 rescue operation in Somalia. Here is the Walter Reed Disability Certification, detailing the loss of both lower limbs to an anti-tank mine. Here are the approved support van orders and the Purple Heart license plate officially issued by the Department of Veterans Affairs." She paused, not for lack of evidence, but to allow everyone time to absorb the facts. Denvers stared at the file as if it were alien. His gaze wavered, yet his mouth remained firm. "I still require further verification." Briggs said nothing. She simply inclined her head toward a young Marine behind her, holding a tablet. He stepped forward, handed the device to her. "We've also reviewed Officer Kyle Denvers' service records. Public data from the City Disability Board shows he's receiving long-term disability benefits for a back injury sustained on duty." Briggs swiped the screen. Social media posts on Instagram, TikTok, and his personal Facebook over the past 6 months document him competing in CrossFit events, deadlifting over 400 pounds, performing box jumps at military standard heights, videos shot across multiple Charlotte gyms. The atmosphere constricted. The man who had silently forced Richard to prove every inch of his honor now stood trembling before the wordless crowd, utterly speechless. Rowley stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Denver's. "You are receiving disability benefits, correct?" Denver's did not answer. "And yet you tried to force a veteran without legs, a man whose honor could teach you more in a lifetime than you've ever known, to surrender the van he needs to live." His voice was calm, yet it carried to the lot's far edge. No one stirred. No one needed to speak. Truth now required no defense. Briggs looked to Richard. She nodded, as if to say, "We're here. You needn't say another word." In the pale morning light, one truth stood revealed. Not just who held the right papers, but who lived with integrity. A collective sigh rose. No single source. Perhaps a fellow veteran. Perhaps a bystander. Yet it sounded like a tolling bell. They had witnessed too often the vulnerable forced to prove their worth. But today, no one remained silent. An elderly woman, once a military nurse, stepped forward, handed Briggs supplemental records, Richard's VA, Charlotte treatment history signed by physicians. Every detail matched. Treatment dates, support equipment, routine evaluations. Briggs reviewed and passed the documents to Rowley. He nodded. "Complete," he murmured, as if issuing the final verdict. Denver's began to step back. Not a word of apology, his face ashen, not with regret, but with fear. For the first time in his police career, he faced a truth no badge or authority could suppress, the truth of human dignity. A younger veteran who had served in Afghanistan stood nearby, hands clasped behind his back. He shook his head quietly. "He doesn't understand. Veterans don't seek pity. They deserve respect." Briggs knelt beside Richard, level with his eyes. "Lieutenant Hale," she said, voice soft but resolute. "Everything is settled. This van goes nowhere, nor do you." Richard remained silent, yet his gaze softened. A long breath escaped him, expelling 3 decades of unnamed weight. A rare feeling, trusted without begging. Rowley turned back to Denver's, no raising of voice, no rebuke needed. He stood tall, composed, eyes tempered by comrades lost and enemies subdued. "Next time you suspect a man in a wheelchair, remember, some wounds do not lie where you can see them." In the distance, a tow truck siren sounded, arriving late to hook onto Richard's van. Briggs raised her hand, signaling decisively. "No towing today." The driver, merely a contractor, nodded, reversed, and departed wordlessly. The incident could have ended there, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of change, a moment every witness would recall all their days, for they saw, sometimes you need no bullets to defend a soldier, only to stand by him at the right time. The scrape of the tow truck's hook wheels on asphalt sounded like a slash across a freshly repainted canvas of order. A large tow rig, its long arms slowly reversing toward the silver van. The vehicle bound up with the final years of a soldier without legs, yet still possessing unyielding will. Briggs raised her hand in a clear signal to halt. The driver hesitated, then cut the engine. All movement froze, as if the entire lot held its breath. In that moment, Richard lifted his eyes. He did not look at the tow truck, nor at the crowd circling him. His gaze fixed on a single man, Kyle Denver's. Denver's stood slightly off to one side, wedged between 2 lines of veterans. No hand touched him. Yet no one took their eyes off him. His aggression gone, his confidence evaporated. He was merely a young man forced to face a truth he was unprepared to confront. Richard drew a deep breath, exhaled slowly. His voice rose, not loud but impossible to ignore. "I lost my legs," he said, "so that you'd have the right to doubt me." A silence followed, stretching out like a heavy stone dropped into a still lake. No one stirred. No one dared break the weight of those words. He stared directly into Denvers's eyes, the same eyes that had witnessed comrades fall, that had seen enemies scream, that had known emptiness from loss, yet now held no anger, only a cold serenity. "But I forgive you." No applause, no cries, only the breeze whispering across the lot, the flutter of the VA flag atop the roof, a lone bird call in the distance, and a young officer frozen in place. Richard's forgiveness was not an act of pity, nor a display of magnanimity, but a reminder, to Denvers and to all who heard, that honor does not reside in paperwork or medals. It lies in how one chooses to rise after being wronged. And when an old soldier speaks forgiveness, not because he is weak, but because he is strong enough to forego vengeance, that is when people realize dignity can be stripped away, but never broken. Briggs bowed her head slightly. Rowley closed his eyes for a brief moment. Some veterans slipped hands from their pockets and placed them over their hearts, not in pledge, but in remembrance. Never forget. Denvers lowered his face. No one forced him. No one pushed him. But the silence, heavier than any accusation, drew him back several steps. For the first time, he ceased to be Officer Denvers. He was simply a man before a truth greater than rank, another's self-respect. The tow truck quietly turned away. Briggs spoke a single sentence to the driver. "No vehicles towed here today." He nodded and departed without another word. Richard remained seated. Yet this time, he was not alone. Veterans stood silently around him without speaking. One handed him a bottle of water. Another opened the van's rear doors to restore his neatly folded three-cornered unit flag to its place. Someone adjusted the rearview mirror. Small gestures, but together they were invisible hands lifting him from behind. A young girl, perhaps someone's granddaughter, stepped forward. She did not know what had transpired, yet instinct compelled her to lower her head. Richard offered a small nod, then saluted her with a steady, deliberate motion. Tears fell from her eyes without her understanding why. In that instant, no one saw a man in a wheelchair. They saw a soldier, still standing guard. 3 weeks later, the Charlotte Police Department formally announced the suspension of Officer Kyle Denvers from duty. No uniform, no badge, and most importantly, no longer the power to stand before someone and question their character based solely on prejudice. Alongside the suspension came a federal criminal investigation into fraud in his disability claims. The videos he once flaunted as athletic achievements now served as evidence. Law exists not merely to punish, but justice, sometimes, must be reminded. Meanwhile, Richard's van was returned, not only intact but cleaned until it gleamed. The towing company, which had simply followed orders without understanding the situation at first, sent an official letter of apology. More than that, they chose to donate a portion of that month's profits to the local VFW post, the gathering place for veterans like Richard, where every chair holds a memory. Richard said nothing when he got his van back. He simply placed his hands on the steering wheel, closed his eyes, then whispered something no one could hear. Perhaps a word of thanks, perhaps a vow. But surely, that was the moment a warrior realized. He did not fight this battle alone. At the VA Charlotte Center,
A new bronze plaque was erected. Not ornate, not large, yet sturdy and solemn. Beneath the words, "In honor of those who gave themselves and never surrendered," appeared the name, Lieutenant Richard Hale. There was no grand ceremony, but on the day it was mounted, dozens of veterans and VA staff stood silently. Some elderly leaned on canes, some sat in wheelchairs. They did not applaud, they did not take pictures. Only a few whispered, "He deserved this." In the afternoon light streaming through the windows, the plaque reflected the image of a generation, those who went to war, those who suffered losses, those who returned in silence, and now were recognized not with pity, but with reverence. A little boy walked by with his mother, pointed and asked, "Mom, who is he?" The mother knelt, gently replied, "He is the man who taught us that silence can be powerful." And that was what remained, not the van, not the incident, but the lesson. A soldier may fall, but honor, if upheld, will stand in his place. That day, Richard stayed in his van longer than usual. He did not start the engine, nor go anywhere. He simply sat and gazed through the windshield at the plaque glittering in the light. No one knew what he was thinking, but everyone understood. He was more than the man honored. He was the reason the community remembered. Some values should never be towed away. In the end, Richard's story was not just a confrontation, but a living lesson in perseverance, brotherhood, and a value that cannot be towed off, honor. It reminds us a soldier may lose many things, but no one can strip away the courage and dignity for which he fought to preserve. And in a just society, when one is harmed, the community will rise to protect him. Thank you for joining us through this story. If you were moved, please like and share this video so more people can hear it. And don't forget to comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's wonderful to connect with you across America and around the world. Comment 1 if you believe this story deserves to be shared, so we can find the motivation to tell more tales that make you proud to be American.